Could it be? But me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to this LouieTeeNetwork exclusive. I'm not a college football guy, never acted as if I was, but I am an NFL guy that pays a ton of attention, very close attention to the draft and a lot of these young players. And if you wanted a game that was going to produce a ton of NFL talent, this was the one to watch. And we saw a number of guys that are going to hear their names called on either day one or day two of the NFL draft. Tons of talent playing in tonight's game. And so wanted to just come up here and give you a quick little overview of the game itself. Not really much here to see. Ohio State is like Notre Dame senior, essentially, when it comes to these types of big games. I don't expect them to win many of them. Despite having the talent to do so, they're not as talented as Alabama. They're not as talented as Clemson, I would even say. But I'm still in somewhat shock as to what they did to Clemson a couple of weeks back. However, Clemson was so poorly coached, it felt like on defense. I don't know what Brent Venables was doing a couple of weeks ago and what the hell was going on, but they allowed Justin Fields to go off. You saw what Fields looked like tonight. And I've always said that Fields, for me, at least for my money, is not a guy that really performs all that well in these kinds of games. This is the Justin Fields I've come accustomed to. The one that threw a big interception late versus Clemson. The one that, barely got his team past Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game this year. The one that struggled versus Indiana in their biggest matchup of the season this year. And, when he went off for 6 touchdowns against Clemson, I'm not going to lie to you, I was amazed. Didn't think he had that in him against that caliber of opponent. But again, I don't think Clemson, and you can look at Clemson all season long defensively. I don't think they were very good defensively this season. I really don't. We saw what Notre Dame was able to do to them once. We saw what BC was able to do to them once. And we saw what Ohio State was able to do to them. So Clemson gave up points this year. They were just capable of scoring. And they got beat up against Ohio State. They earned the right to play against Alabama. And Justin Fields, the one that I have seen and really don't trust, showed up tonight. And was he compromised? Maybe. Maybe. I don't know. Some people will make excuses for him. So be it. Let me first say this. I wasn't going to do this video. A lot of people on Twitter kept asking me, was I going to do a breakdown of this game? This game really doesn't need a breakdown. I'm more interested in the individual parts that participated in tonight's game than I am the actual outcome, because it wasn't a very competitive game after about midway point of the second quarter. Once Alabama seized control and Ohio State forgot that Devontae Smith was on the field, and oh, by the way, he was the Heisman Trophy winner just a few days ago. They seem to have forgotten that, and they needed a reminder. So Alabama, Mac Jones, and you know what? When a guy plays that well, I'm going to call him by his government name. Michael Jones went out and smoked those boys tonight. All right, and let me give you his numbers. 36 of 45 for 464 and 5 touchdowns for Michael Jones tonight. Not Mac Jones. He was Michael Jones tonight. Anyway, Devontae Smith, 12 catches, 215 yards and 3 touchdowns, all in the first half. Could you imagine had he played the second half and not gotten hurt on his first target in the third quarter? Could you imagine had he played the entire second half, what his numbers would have looked like? I said he was going for 3 bills. He might have went for 4. Anyhow, Alabama did what I expected them to do in this game, and that's dominate. But I want to talk about the individual performances in this game. I want to talk about Mac Jones. I think he's the most polarizing. I put out a poll question asking who you thought the number 1 wide receiver was in this draft. And it's really just a 2-man race. It's Jamar Chase and it's Devontae Smith. I think Devontae Smith right now in the moment is the guy that everybody sees, and we know how this goes. You know, the guy that leaves that lasting impression and indelible mark on you. The last thing that your eyes see is the last thing that you remember. And so everyone's going to be talking about DeVonta Smith right now. But just a year ago, this same exact time a year ago, who was everybody talking about? Jamar Chase. Why? Because he had just crucified A.J. Terrell in the national championship game en route to LSU, steamrolling Clemson, and them completing what we thought was the greatest college football season, at least these eyes had ever seen. You know, they went through Murderer's Row that year, just ranked team after ranked team after ranked team to get through the SEC West to get to the SEC championship, steamrolled Georgia, got to the playoffs, destroyed everybody in their wake, and including Clemson. And Jamar Chase was a massive reason why. And so it's fitting that DeVonta Smith wins the Heisman. He's the best player in college football this year, rightly so. And I think he was very deserving of the Heisman. But you look at his frame, and you can't ignore that. Now, look, I'm not one of those he can't do it because he's too small type of guys. He'll be fine at the next level. You know, speed is speed, quickness is quickness, and ability is ability, and he has all of those things. So, and he's got tremendous hands and body control. I don't worry about DeVonta Smith and his frame or any of that stuff at the next level. If you can ball, you can ball. He'll figure it out. If he needs to put on a little bit more weight, he will do so. I'm not worried about him. But Jamar Chase was a man last year. And so he didn't play a whole year of college football. That matters. That matters. But he didn't forget how to play football. So I think that's going to be an interesting debate all draft season long. I think that's going to be one of the bigger debates. But Mac Jones is going to be someone that I think is going to be polarizing in this draft. Him and Kyle Trask, to be honest with you. But Mac Jones, to me, is a much tougher eval than that of Kyle Trask, because Trask didn't have this kind of talent around him at Florida. Had talented guys, you know, don't get me wrong, but not like Mac Jones. You know, this kind of reminds me a lot of the discussion of Joe Burrow last year. Some people wanted to bring up all the talent that he had around him, and again, rightfully so. There's a ton of talent on that LSU football team last year, especially on the offensive side of the football. However, we saw that Joe Burrow, on his own merit, was a difference maker. You know, Joe Burrow, the extender, Joe Burrow, the athlete, you know, Joe Burrow, the playmaker. We saw that, even with all the talent. And I think same could be said a little bit for Tua, even though it's a similar situation. You know, Tua went to Bama. I don't know if you can put together a better wide receiving core than the one he had last year. I mean, just think about what Tua was throwing to last year. It was insane when you think about it. Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs go to the league. We thought DeVonta Smith was going last year. He would have been a first-round pick had he come out last year. He decided to go back to Alabama. A lot of people were scratching their heads as to that decision. Najee Harris, I thought, could have come out last year. I wasn't a big Najee Harris fan. I think he actually has done himself some good going back to school, because when I looked at him last year, now I'm like, okay, this guy's a stud. You know, he's Derrick Henry without the speed. That's what Najee Harris is. And he's a much better pass catcher than Derrick Henry. So you can add that into the mix as well. Derrick Henry was never a real threat catching the football. Najee Harris can and will catch the football at the next level. So I think there's a lot to like there with Najee Harris. However, when you look at all the receivers that they had, you know, Jalen Waddle, to add to, of course, the two guys that got drafted last year, as I mentioned already, you add Jalen Waddle, you add DeVonta Smith, and you just look at the abundance of riches that Tua had at his disposal last year. And now you look at Mac Jones, and you say, similar situation, but we saw Tua do it for 3 years. Despite the injuries, we saw Tua come in at halftime of a national championship game in his freshman year and will this team to a victory against Georgia. We saw Tua do a lot of great things despite the injuries, and he had quite a bit of them in college, but we saw Tua do some fantastic things. So we knew what he was capable of. That's not necessarily the case with Mac Jones, and we already know he's not a tremendous athlete. I think he moves well enough. All right, I look at him and I say, he moves enough. I liken him to Andy Dalton in that regard. He moves enough, you know. Is he going to knock your socks off with his athleticism? No. But similar to Andy Dalton, on 3rd and 4, he can get you 6 and get out. His sliding ability needs some work. But at the end of the day, I look at Mac Jones. I do see some redeeming qualities. I can tell you right now, he's a smart guy. Gets through his reads quickly. Knows where to go with the football. Doesn't put the ball in harm's way very often. Again, with all the talent around him, it's not necessary for you to put the football in harm's way. So I do understand that. But at the end of the day, he's smart. He's tough. And when I say tough, I'm not just talking about physical toughness. We saw some of the physical toughness tonight. Now, it's not very hard to stay in a game that you're winning, 45 to 21 or whatever the score was when the injury was sustained. But he's shown toughness throughout the season. He was banged up a little bit against Notre Dame in the playoff game, and he stuck it out. And this is a guy that had some mental toughness that he's shown throughout his career and had to grow. And there's that can't be discounted when a guy has had to grow at the collegiate level. It's not just handed to him. When you think about, it's funny. I talked about Mac Jones and all of the things that I think he brings to the table, despite him having limited mobility. And a lot of people said, that sounds like Dwayne Haskins to me. And on one hand, you're right, because that was the thing everybody was leaning on with Haskins. NFL arm, smart guy, and he's tough. Now, I don't know if I can vouch for the mental toughness with Dwayne Haskins or not, but the maturity piece was definitely not there. Mac Jones had to grow at Alabama. He had to wait his turn. And this is where I can identify mental toughness. Now, you could say the same thing for Dwayne Haskins. Had to wait his turn behind J.T. Barrett and company, and he had to beat out Joe Burrow. But at the end of the day, Mac Jones had to wait his turn. He had a scholarship to go to Kentucky. He turned it down, came to Alabama, and had to wait his turn not only behind Tua, but also waiting, behind Jalen Hurts and all of those guys that were there. And then after all of those guys come and go, he only has really 1 year of eligibility left to play because Tua's injury allowed him to get some reps last year. A lot of people don't realize he played at the end of the season once Tua went down last year and actually played pretty well. And so he only had 1 year as a starter, essentially, at Alabama left, and he made the most of it. And that takes some mental toughness because we've seen guys that weren't getting an opportunity to play. That's the new thing. Transfer. Find some playing time somewhere else. And he didn't do that. He stuck it out, and he got his chance, and he made the most of it. So he got to grow as a player mentally. I think he's physically tough, and I think he's got an NFL arm. Say what you want about him. I think he's got an NFL arm. So I don't love the lack of mobility, but I think there's enough of it there that he can be serviceable in that regard at the next level. The real question is, what happens when there are tighter windows to throw the football into? What happens when teams start to heat you up with pressure? You saw what happened when I don't know why, for the life of me, Ohio State didn't bring more pressure tonight. You bring pressure off the slot one time, you get to him, and he fumbles the ball. And we didn't really see a ton of pressure. Now, I get it. When Devontae Smith is tearing you a new asshole, and he's got 12 for 215 and 3 scores at the half, it's hard for you to bring pressure when, Wade is out there at the quarterback position getting smoked to the point where it looks like he's jogging. And I don't know if that's his thing or what, but Shaun Wade looked horrible tonight. He gave up the big play down the sidelines where he just got beat off the line of scrimmage, didn't lay a finger on Devontae Smith. If you're going to come up in his face and delete the airspace, you best put hands on him Or that's exactly what's going to happen. All he did was Sierra'd him, gave him a 1-2 step. Let me see you 1-2 step. And then went to the outside and he was lost in the sauce. And then he looked like he was jogging. Then on the touchdown at the end, when the guy comes in motion and Mac Jones just flips it to him, he's jogging across the formation. Like, I don't know what's up with this Shaun Wade dude, but very, very unimpressed. Okay. Anyhow, I don't know how he's going to handle pressure. Legit pressure. NFL pressure. When these windows become tighter, is he going to be able to figure that stuff out? They talked about this guy having a bit of a temper when he makes mistakes and not being able to overcome them mentally. How he's grown in that aspect, but when he fumbled it tonight, they said that he went over to the sideline and he was upset, but then he calmed down, he had a woosah moment, and then he was good. There are going to be a lot more mistakes when you get to the NFL. That's for damn sure. Especially when you're not throwing to Devontae Smith, and you're not throwing to Mechie, and you're not throwing to Jalen Waddle, and you're not playing against Indiana, or excuse me, not Indiana. You're not playing against Ole Miss, and you're not playing against Missouri, and you're not playing against all of these teams that you get to beat up on, Vandy. You're not playing against these teams, okay, where there's a massive talent discrepancy. Now you're playing up against teams that are of equal or greater talent. And that's why this is going to be an interesting evaluation. And it's going to be all over the place. You're going to have some people that love him. You're going to have some people that think it shouldn't be touched until day 3. You're going to have some people that are, on board with him being a day 2 pick, but nothing more than that. You're going to have some people that swear by him and think he's a day 1 guy. I think his evaluation of all the quarterbacks, I think his is going to be all over the place. I really do. And all it takes is one, and that's what I said on Twitter. All it takes is one team to fall in love with Mac Jones. And, it's funny because we watch these players, and you can put them in specific locales. Like, you can envision them being on this team or that team. And I can tell you this. Najee Harris looks like a Pittsburgh Steeler to me. Mac Jones looks like a New England Patriot to me. And Devontae Smith doesn't necessarily look like he belongs on a team per se. More so, I just feel like he's a guy that it's hard for him not to be the first receiver off the board. And you know what I question too with Jamar Chase? And, the NFL is kind of mulling over this idea of should they have the combine or shouldn't they, or should it be a scaled back version of the scouting combine? How fast is Jamar Chase? He doesn't strike me as a guy that is a burner per se. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be shocked if, and look, 4.48 is plenty fast. If he ran a 4.52, that's plenty fast. I'm just telling you right now. I don't know if Jamar Chase is a burner. He's just a physical specimen. But if he ran a 4.5 flat, would you be surprised? Because I wouldn't. I think he's faster than that. I think he's probably like a 4.46 or something like that. But it's going to pale in comparison to whatever Devontae Smith is running. That's for damn sure. It wouldn't shock me if that guy's running a 4.37. Okay? And I don't know what his 40 is. But it's funny. I was having a conversation with my dad tonight. And he's like, man, it doesn't even look like that dude is running. He got some big-ass strides, man. And he's right. He's one of those dudes that makes it look effortless. Like that opening bubble screen of the game that they threw to him. Where he gets to the outside, I'm like, there's no way he's turning this corner and getting big yards. And he did. It's the exact play they showed that they did against Notre Dame. It's the exact same screen they ran. Like they had to know that was coming at some point. And they run it on the first play. And he still gets to the outside, still turns the corner, and gets big yardage. This guy's ridiculously fast. And despite the slight frame, I wouldn't be shocked if he's the first receiver taken in this draft. Now, where is that? I don't know. We'll see what happens. There are a number of teams. The first team that comes to mind that could use a number 1 wide receiver is the Giants. But trust me, there are other teams that are ahead of the Giants because if I'm not mistaken, the Giants are number 10, I think, in this draft. There are other teams that I'm looking at and I'm saying, how do you pass on a talent like this that may just take him just off of the principle of, look, this guy's too good to pass up. So we'll see what happens with his draft stock. He's not getting out of the top 10 easily. I think you could see two receivers go in the top 10, but I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with these quarterbacks. I think you're going to see 3 go in the top 10. There's a possibility that you could see a 4th go in the top 15. I think that you're going to see offensive linemen, always a hot commodity, especially at the tackle position. You could see 3 or 4 of those go, top 15, as we usually do. And this is supposed to be a really good offensive tackle draft. We saw one in the game tonight in Alex Leatherwood for the Alabama Crimson Tide. So what you're going to see is a bunch of teams who are going to prioritize talent and need and kind of mesh those things together because you can always use edge rushers. I think this might be a disappointing edge rusher draft. And again, I haven't done my homework yet, so we got a lot of homework to do as to figure out where this draft is really strong, where it's weak. If you need one of these, you better get it quick because once it's gone, like tight end last year, for instance, we figured that out really quickly, that was a very weak position, and if you needed one, you needed to grab it sooner rather than later because there weren't going to be a bunch of talented guys that were going to move the needle at the tight end position. And I don't think we saw a first-round tight end, and I don't think we saw a tight end come off the board until, if I'm not mistaken, in the late 40s when the Bears took Notre Dame tight end. What is his name? Can't even think of his name right now, but took the Notre Dame tight end. I think he was the first one off the board, and that might have been at 50. It's like 48 or 50, somewhere around there. So bottom line is we're going to get into this, draft, but looking at the talent on the field tonight, when you go to the Ohio State side of things, I'm not a Justin Fields guy. Never have been. Don't know if I ever will be a Justin Fields guy. And, I don't like to do the whole Ohio State quarterback thing. That's going to be a really popular narrative as we get closer to the draft. Don't draft Ohio State quarterbacks. They all suck. We've seen, and then Dwayne Haskins doesn't make the narrative any better. Then you'll look at all the quarterbacks, and then they'll run down the list of those guys. I'm trying to think of the big kid that won the national championship that got drafted by the Chargers and then ended up playing in the AAF. Can't even think of his name. But then obviously J.T. Barrett was there, and none of these guys have panned out. Troy Smith, Heisman Trophy winner. We know the list of these guys. And so he's going to add his name to the list of these Ohio State quarterbacks that people are going to think, stay away. Stay as far away as you can. He's different. He looks different. Everything about him feels different. However, we're going to see if it is Cardale Jones. Thank you for that, Rich. We're going to see if he's different. I don't like how this guy plays in big spots. That's the biggest takeaway right now is that he doesn't do a good enough job for me of going through his reads fast enough. I don't think he makes fast enough progressions through his reads. I think that he struggles with his decision making sometimes. I think he is a guy that if he doesn't like what he sees, takes off and runs, which is fine, because you want to have that ability that if you don't like what you see, use your legs. You much rather a guy run for 8 yards than make a mistake and throw an interception. That said, though, you feel like he's going to be leaving some things out there on the field. And when he escapes to throw, I don't always feel like tonight, and again, you could chalk it up to a number of different things. But I felt like tonight when he was throwing the football, there were a lot of wobbly balls that hung in the air forever. And I'm like, dude, you can't put a little bit more zip on these throws? Like, you can't throw a tighter spiral? And then when he's got a chance to throw a loft job in the end zone, as he scrambles out of pressure, steps up, scrambles up, and he's got a wide open receiver in the back of the end zone. He throws a 800-mile-an-hour fastball, and he misses him. And I'm like, what the hell was that? And for me, he can wow you with some of his throws. We saw that against Clemson. I thought the little back shoulder throw to the freshman that ended up being incomplete because he bobbled it, I thought that was a tremendous throw there. Thought he was a little long on the throw to the tight end over the middle of the field early in the ball game. That was a hell of a catch by that tight end. He's intriguing. I heard that he's a junior. I'll have to do some work on him if, in fact, he decides to declare. But he was pretty damn impressive early on until he took that shot. And then I didn't really hear from him for the rest of the night. I don't think he even got a target after that shot he took down by the end zone. But I got questions, a lot of questions about Justin Fields. It was amazing, how we are with this whole latest and greatest thing. And that performance he put up, there was all this, Twitter and social media momentum for this guy to potentially be the number one pick. Look out. He just outplayed Trevor Lawrence. And I'm like, first of all, Trevor Lawrence is cool, but he's no slam dunk. I think he's going to be a good NFL player, but he's no slam dunk. He's no Andrew Luck. Just so you guys know, he's no Joe Burrow, okay? Speaking of Trevor Lawrence. But he's way better than Justin Fields. And I don't think this is even a conversation to be had. Period. So I think tonight's game solidified that. Is he still going to be the second quarterback off the board? More likely than not, absolutely. There's not a big enough sample size of Trey Lance for him to leapfrog a guy. Had this been a normal college football season and Trey Lance got to play this year, there was a realistic possibility that he could have been the number 2 quarterback off the board. But because he only played in that one little token game that they put out there for him, which was trash, I think that's going to hinder him. I told you I wanted to see Trey Lance in a season in which turnovers and losses and things of that nature were had so that you could see how he responded to adversity. And because this guy didn't have an interception and didn't lose a game, we still don't really know what Trey Lance does when adversity hits. And so that's a big thing for me. But I think he is interesting. Zach Wilson is really interesting. And he's going to be a guy that a lot of people fall in love with. A lot of people have already fallen in love with him. I don't think he overtakes Justin Fields for the second quarterback off the board. As you look at the rest of these Ohio State players, I really like Chris Olave. I can't speak for any of you out there. I think he's going to be a really good wide receiver in the NFL. He looks to be really talented. Interesting to see what he decides to do, whether to go back to school or declare for the NFL. If he comes out, he's got first-round pick written all over him to me as well. But again, got to look at all these receivers because there's a bunch of these guys that are coming out that we just assume are going to be first-round picks. Like I said, and I say this every year because it's funny that you talk to everyone and there's 55 first-round picks. Well, guess what? Only 32 guys are going to be selected in the first round. So not everybody can be a first-round pick. But Olave looks good. It sucks what happened to Trey Sermon. You never want to see that, especially in your final collegiate game potentially. I didn't think he was a first-round back anyway, but second round it would have been perfectly fine by me with Trey Sermon. And now he's got this collarbone injury. Looks like it's significant. Who knows what his status is moving forward. So, that's something to consider. But when I look at that Ohio State defense, really disappointed in Shaun Wade tonight. I thought he was awful. And his draft stock, I thought, was just plummeting all season long anyway. I don't think that he came into the season as a guy that everybody was looking at and saying he could be one of the top corners, in this draft. And as the season progressed, I think his stock just continued to plummet. And tonight was, to me, a continuation of what's been a season of this guy struggling. And at times he looked like a guy that was disinterested. And to me, that's the worst of it all. Hey, look, A.J. Terrell got his ass smoked last year in the national championship. You know what I said? I liked his mental toughness. And to me, he gained more respect in that game than anything else because he didn't quit. He didn't back down. Yep, I got my ass smoked a couple of times, but he kept fighting. I was impressed with A.J. Terrell, and he got drafted in the first round, I think, because of that game. A lot of people dinged him for that. I thought it was a hell of a performance. Yeah, you got your ass smoked. As a corner, you're going to get beat. But they at no position on the field, maybe outside of quarterback, but no position on the field, do you need to be more mentally tough and have selective memory than the cornerback position? Because mistakes are going to happen. You're going to get beat. You're on an island. Everybody's going to see it. And I thought A.J. Terrell handled it well. I didn't think Shaun Wade handled it well at all tonight. So his draft stock is plummeting. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, Patrick Surtain II, he looks like he's got top 15 pick written all over him. He's going to go in the first round. Now, where in the first round, I don't know. But Patrick Surtain looks the part. Got the NFL bloodlines, and so I think he's coming off the board relatively quickly, and he looks like he's legit and the real deal. Now that defensive tackle for Alabama, I'm not impressed. I'm not gonna lie to you. They talked about him being the second best defensive tackle in this draft if he comes out. If that is in fact the case, if you're telling me he's the best you got to offer for defensive tackles, then that tells me that this is a really sorry defensive tackle draft this year. Because if you're telling me, first of all, the sack that he got, he didn't get blocked. He didn't get blocked by anybody. Now, the fourth down play was pretty damn impressive, but he didn't get blocked by anybody. So, I'm just not buying that he's all like, and I've seen Alabama defensive tackles, a slew of these guys come into the league. None of them have been elite nor dominant. And we've seen a bunch of these guys come into the league, and I've got two of them on my favorite team, and none of these guys are elite. They may have elite traits. They may do one or two things really, really well, but they're not top 15 type picks. Okay? They're not 9 sack a year guys. They may be disruptive forces in the run game, and there's something to be said about that because you got to be able to stop the run in the NFL. But make no mistake about it, he doesn't look the part of a dominant force. He doesn't look anything like Derek Brown a season ago, who went 7th overall to the Carolina Panthers. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So we'll see what happens with that. But at the end of the day, trying to see if Jalen Waddle is another guy. I want to mention him while we're here. Gutsy effort tonight. He should not have played. And I think that's an indictment on, I don't care how bad the young man wanted to play. To me, that's an indictment on Nick Saban. Because to me, and look, I may be out of pocket for this. But for me, if I'm a player, I want my coach to have my best interests at heart. You know what would be really refreshing if I'm a young recruit looking to pick a school? Is to see Nick Saban care about his player enough to say, dude, you've done enough. I love the fact that you want to play in this game, but your future is more important than you helping us win a national championship tonight. So tell you what, you're going to sit out of this thing. You're going to get ready for the NFL draft. I love the fact that you've busted your ass to try to get back on the field, but you can't play in this game, and I'm not going to allow you to play in this game because your future is more important than us winning a national championship tonight. You know how far that would go with future recruits and other people that are watching for Saban to say, nah, you're not playing. To me, this seems like a guy that's desperate to win at all costs. I'll put a guy out here that is clearly compromised, limping, broken ankle, has no business being out here, could barely, he was running and, they tried to clean it up on the telecast to make Nick Saban look like he wasn't this monster. Like, hey, Allison Williams is like, hey, he's been medically cleared. He's 100% healthy. It's fine. He's just got to adjust. That didn't look like a guy that just needs to learn how to run on his ankle. That looked like a guy that was definitely compromised that shouldn't have been out there. Shouldn't have been out there. No business out there. You got a future to think about. And Saban needed to step. Sometimes these players, they're warriors. And you got to be able to protect them from themselves. Saban needed to do that tonight, and he didn't. Shame on him. For me, at least. He shouldn't have been out there. And if I'm a recruit, like, that means you want to win more than you care about me. Anyway, Waddle is a first-round pick if he's healthy, and he'll get healthy eventually. He's got that kind of speed. He's got that kind of game-breaking ability. But I think that injury may scare off some teams, and he may not be a first-round pick. Again, what's going to determine how many receivers get picked? Because what did we say last year? Man, it's a lot of receivers. We could see, 5 or 6 or 7. Even we were talking 7 or 8 potentially. I think it ultimately ended up being 5 or 6 that win in the first round. Teams always need receivers. Always. Teams always need quarterbacks. Teams always need left tackles. So you're going to see tackles, quarterbacks, and I think receivers, once again, come off the board at a high clip in this draft. I think you'll mix in a few corners. You'll mix in a linebacker or two. Obviously, there are a couple of guys that stand out at the linebacker position. Dylan Moses was in this game. I got to watch tape on him. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what he is or isn't right now, but that's another one of those positions that when you look at Alabama and the track record, they usually are solid at the next level, but they don't really move the needle per se. That's another one of those positions where you go, are these linebackers actually really good, or is it are they a byproduct of playing behind dominant defensive lines? And I don't know if Dylan Moses played behind a dominant defensive line this year. I really don't think that was the case. However, I'm not sure if he is a true difference maker. Like, I'm always wary of Alabama linebackers. I just am. Because usually, and I'm not saying don't take them, I'm wary of spending a first round pick on those guys. Similar to what we talked about with Michael Jones and all the talent around him, and it's going to be a tough evaluation. Sometimes it's a tough eval for these Alabama linebackers because of all the talent that's in front of them and that they're surrounded by at the safety position and on the defensive line and things of that nature. It just makes their job so much easier. When you got all this talent around you, you're just allowed to just run free and make plays. So we'll see what happens. All in all, thought that, this was a game to showcase a lot of talent. We saw that tonight, more so on the Alabama side than on the Ohio State side. But when it's all said and done, Bama's got about 3 or 4 offensive linemen that are going to be drafted, and probably relatively high day 1, day 2 guys. They've got a bunch of skill guys that are going to come out and be drafted day 1, day 2 again, whether you're talking Waddle, whether you're talking Smith, whether you're talking Harris, Mac Jones. All of these guys going to be day 1, day 2 picks. I don't think any of those guys get out of day 2. If they're not first rounders, I think they go second, no later than the third. So a bunch of talent on that side of the football for Alabama. You go to the defensive side, there's talented guys on that side of the football field as well. I thought the targeting call was definitely targeting. I hate the college football targeting rule, though. That dude was over there ready to cry. He was holding back tears. You could see it. At least they don't have to leave the field anymore. They used to make them leave the sidelines and go back into the locker rooms. At least you can stay on the sidelines now. But look, you're playing a game. Shit happens. You don't want guys leaning with their helmets in the crown of their heads and all that stuff. You want that stuff out of the game. But you shouldn't disqualify a guy for that. Come on, man. Like, this dude worked all season long to get to this game, and you're telling me I'm done? I can't play anymore? Because in a bang-bang situation, look, it wasn't a good hit. And those are the types of hits they're trying to get out of the game. But at the same time, how many times do we see it happen in the NFL? Shit happens, man. It's football. You're running at a high rate of speed. That guy's running at a high rate of speed. His natural instinct, all right, is to protect himself. He's going to duck his head. You're going to duck your head. Shit happens. Don't throw me out of the game for that. But, I mean, it is what it is. It's the targeting rule. We know what it is. And he got ejected out of the game, but it didn't hurt them. It didn't hurt him. And at the end of the day, They were just fine on the defensive side of the football. And as they always say in Alabama, roll tide, and that's what they did tonight, 52-24 over the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I'll leave you guys essentially with this. Ohio State, to me, is no better than Notre Dame in these situations. I always expect them to lose. I was shocked that they did what they did to Clemson. But then again, when I look at Clemson and what they've done this year, I shouldn't be shocked. But this is who they are. They're not going to win these types of games. Their program is what it is. They're good enough to win the Big Ten every year because the Big Ten is okay. It's not great. Michigan is okay. They're not great. And there's no one else really there to challenge them. And this was a tough year. Obviously, with COVID and the Big Ten getting a late start on the season, Penn State had a down year. I mean, honestly, Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State is really what the best that the Big Ten has to offer every year. And whomever makes it out of that group usually isn't going to be talented enough to beat Alabama or LSU or Georgia or Auburn or any of these teams or Florida, any of these teams that come out of the SEC. They're not going to be good enough to beat any of those teams. And they're not going to be good enough normally to beat Clemson. So they're stuck in that same rut as Notre Dame. Every now and again, you're going to get lucky. You're going to hit that inside straight, and you're going to find your way to the national championship like Notre Dame did like 10 years ago, and then you're going to get your ass beat because you're going to run into Alabama again, and you're going to get your ass beat. And that's where Ohio State is. They're good enough to navigate their way through their schedule and through the Big Ten and win the Big Ten championship. I honestly wish that they didn't have to do the whole, Big Ten East versus West or whatever. Like, just the two best teams in the Big Ten. Because normally whomever comes out of that opposite end of the bracket, opposite side of the bracket in the Big Ten isn't better than, Penn State or Michigan. I'd just rather see those two teams play again. I don't want to see them play Iowa. I don't want to see them beat up on, Northwestern. How many times do we have to watch them play Northwestern or Wisconsin? Like, spare me. Just let them play Michigan or Penn State again for the right to go to the playoffs. But in any event, they're no better than Notre Dame. They got more talent than Notre Dame. I'll say that. They got more talent. They get more talent at Ohio State than Notre Dame does. But they're no better than Notre Dame. They're going to get to this game, and they're going to get their asses beat. They're in the same bracket with It's Oklahoma, it's Ohio State, and it's Notre Dame. You put them in whatever order you want, but those teams will never win a national championship as long as Nick Saban is still at Alabama and Dabo Swinney is still at Clemson. Those three programs will not win a national championship unless there are significant injuries to those two programs and they are perfectly healthy and they find a path there with no resistance from those teams. But as long as Alabama's there or Clemson's there, they're going to beat every single time. And throw in LSU when they're good and they recruit well. They're going to beat Oklahoma 10 times out of 10. They're going to beat Ohio State 10 times out of 10. They're going to beat Notre Dame 10 times out of 10. And you saw it again tonight. So college football is what it is. We know it's the haves and the have-nots. And we saw it again tonight. One of these days, we'll actually get a competitive national championship game. When was the last competitive one we got? Georgia and Alabama, right? That was the last competitive one we got. Well, how long ago was that? 3 years ago? 4 years ago now? How long ago was that? And you know what? We were on a little streak there. We had the Deshaun Watson game when they beat Alabama. But these last few, just ass whoopings. Anyway, we'll see what happens. All right. I'm going to glide to the side and get out of here. So this essentially marks the beginning of draft season for me, which is why I wanted to come on. I wasn't going to because, again, I'm not a college football guy, but I watched this game because there are a lot of prospects that were going to be in the NFL draft playing, and I wanted to get my first, real look at them, watching them in this game. But at the end of the day, I knew who was going to win this game. You knew who was going to win this game. It wasn't a matter of if they were going to win. It was just by how much. So, got a super chat here. I want to take this before I get out. Vincent Cole. Actually, I got two. One from Vincent Cole here. Thank you for the super chat, Vincent Cole, who writes, "Are you high on Chris Olave?" I already answered that. I do like Chris Olave a lot. I liked him as a freshman, actually. So, I've seen good growth in maturation from Chris Olave. He's gotten bigger. He was a small string bean when he was, first coming up as a freshman, but he was still making plays. I remember Olave making plays, and so good to see Olave continuing to make plays. I do like him. CJ Shoots Photo, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who also writes, draft impressions. Jalen Waddle possible at 19. It would be interesting. I think the talent suggests yes, but how do you feel about him? His ankle, I think he's earned a lot of brownie points tonight with NFL scouts and GMs, and he didn't have to play tonight. He probably shouldn't have played tonight, but he did. And that's, to me, a stark contrast to what we've seen the last few years in college football. Now, granted, this is the national championship. He didn't come back to play in the Kraft Macaroni and Cheese Bowl. And, I'll always love to bring that one up because that's my favorite name. He didn't come back to play in the Dick's Sporting Goods Bowl. He came back to play in the national championship. That being said, how many times have we seen guys say, all right, I'm banged up. I'm good. I'm going to just go ahead and start preparing for the combine. Get ready for the draft. That's the trend now. How many dudes, and this is a totally different, separate issue. And guys had every right to choose health over football. But how many guys decided to opt out this season due to COVID? Some of it was due to COVID. Some of it was, I don't need to put my body at risk. Honestly, let me say this too before I get out of here. This college football season was super trash. Super duper trash. And I'm shocked that we even got here to even crown a national champion. How many games got canceled? There were weeks where Utah was supposed to play UCLA, but Utah couldn't go, so UCLA ended up playing Oregon. What the hell are we doing? We just subbing in teams? It's crazy. This college football season was insane. And the NBA is getting a little taste of it now because they were so hungry to come back. And they didn't really put in the proper protocols. And now they're having to postpone games and do all this because all these guys are getting COVID. It's amazing that we even made it to this national championship game. Because at one point, it didn't seem like it was a reality. But in any event, we did make it. We did crown a champion. And I think it was the best team in college football. I thought the Alabama Crimson Tide were the best team in all of the land, and they proved it again tonight. And once draft night gets here, I think they'll prove it again because I think they'll have the most first rounders this year. And every year we see this. It's either Ohio State, Clemson, or either Ohio State, Clemson, LSU, or Alabama with the most first round picks. And it just goes in cycles. And I think you're going to see it be Alabama this year. With the receivers. I don't know if Najee Harris gets into the first round or not. But, with the offensive line, with Patrick Surtain, I think you're going to see a steady diet of first rounders out of this Alabama Clemson Tide group. And we'll see what happens. We got plenty of time to break all of this stuff down. But, this is my announcement that here we go. I went to the store. I got all my stuff laid out. I'm starting to set up all of my, my workspace and everything that I need to get this process started. So I'm about to hit the ground running. It'll be a little bit different how I disseminate all of the information this year and how I do things, but a lot of it will be on Patreon. I'm not going to lie to you. The film especially will be on Patreon. I'll still do breakdowns. We'll have Inside the Draft Room every week. We'll be looking at different positions. And I'll let you know once we get to that point when we'll start doing that. It'll probably be after the combine, if there's a combine. Maybe there won't be one, but we'll get into every single position in the draft. And I told you I'm doing some homework this year, so expect some in-depth analysis and a lot of guys that will be draftable to be brought up. In past years, you would bring up some guy from some random school, and I'd be like, I really don't know who the hell that is. That shouldn't be the case this year. That shouldn't be the case. I'm gonna do my best to be all over this draft this year. So we'll see. But Alabama rolls over Ohio State. Not a surprise. 52-24. Nick Saban becomes the winningest national championship coach in college football history, winning his 6th national championship. There's really not much more to say about the career that he's put together for himself. Won at LSU, goes to the NFL, realizes he made a mistake, comes back to Bama, and this program has been a powerhouse ever since. And as long as he keeps, doing this, I don't see how he doesn't win 2 or 3 or 4 more national championships. He's the Bill Belichick of college football, and until he decides he doesn't want to do it anymore, I don't see anybody really stopping him, honestly speaking. So, congratulations to the Alabama Crimson Tide, and for the Ohio State Buckeyes, another season, another disappointing finish, but you should be used to it. You should be used to it. The best thing you could probably do at Ohio State is just play in the Rose Bowl. Win the Big Ten, avoid the playoffs, play in a Rose Bowl, and, win that game. You're good at winning that game. But don't play in the playoffs because you're going to get your feelings hurt. So, trust me, I know all about it. I'm a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan. I don't expect to win big games. I don't. When we do, I'm surprised. That should be the position you take as a Ohio State fan. And if you haven't, then you just like disappointment. And that's fine. I'm a glutton for punishment too. So I understand that position as well. But in any event, I'm going to get out of here. Allow you guys to glad to say, look, it's 1 a.m. on the East Coast. Most of you guys, some of you are probably on the West Coast, so this doesn't bother you at all. But I'm on the East Coast. It's 1 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. But I will tell you guys that college football season is over. NFL season has a few more weeks left. And then we are jumping knee deep in to draft coverage. And you know what that means. We're submerging in this college football film. And we're not coming up for air until late April. So, saddle up, guys and gals. It's about to be one hell of a ride, as it usually is. But I can honestly say I'm looking forward to it. So, until next time, I thank you guys for joining me. If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to LouieTeeNetwork for more great content. Can't thank you guys enough for joining me on this stream. Look forward to chopping it up with you guys. Tomorrow, I will be here on the Louie T Network with a brand new Louie T Network podcast tomorrow. We'll talk about everything. All the playoff games from the weekend. We'll recap this national championship game very briefly because I did it here. So I really don't need to do it again. But we'll talk about a few items, a few leftovers from the national championship game. We'll talk about the playoff games, and we'll start looking forward to those matchups. Kind of, take our first look at those matchups, but we'll really dig into those matchups on Thursday's podcast. But we'll talk about another firing in the NFL. I told you we weren't done, and I said there may be another firing or two, where, the ownership and the coach get together, and the ownership has one vision of how he wants the coach to proceed. The coach has another idea about how he wants to move forward. The two don't mesh, and they decide to mutually part ways. So add another team to the list as Doug Peterson was fired. We'll talk about that extensively tomorrow on the podcast. as well. Should be a jam-packed show. Looking forward to it. Until then, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. I thank every single one of you out there for joining me tonight. Remember, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. Turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And also, if you would please hit the like button. 140 of you out there, only 58 likes. If we could get that thing up to 70, 80, possibly 100 before you guys get out of there, that would be awesome. In any event, I'm your man, Lou. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.